Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Needs Some Introduction. I'm your host, Victor, and on this podcast and video series, perhaps, we break down week to week a TV series that we're watching together, usually with a co-host. Sona's here with me again today.
Hi.
And we are here to discuss the final episode of season 2 of Severance, an episode called Cold Harbor. Just a quick couple of show notes. I know that we oftentimes lose subscribers in between shows. Of course, we're wrapping up one series, moving on to the next. But if you have enjoyed Severance, we have quite a few shows you may want to continue. Sona and I will continue to be talking about The White Lotus for the next 3 weeks. And then a very intriguing show here on Apple TV Plus, once again, Your Friends and Neighbors, the new John Hamm series. The trailer for this just dropped a couple of weeks ago. And Sona, I think you will really be intrigued by this. And so many other shows we'll be covering here as well. So many new shows coming in the near future. We'll be talking about, if you like science fiction, because Severance, of course, is a science fiction show. We'll be talking about Black Mirror, which is just announced, Netflix, that it's coming on April 10th. Much sooner than I expected, by the way. And also Andor is coming back. I know your husband, for example, big fan of that show. Yeah. So if you like spy thrillers, a sci-fi set spy thriller, and of course, if you like spy thrillers, check out our coverage of The Agency, which I very much enjoyed just a couple months ago. So a lot to check out in our back catalog. You could check out our previous coverage of season 1 of Severance. So there's something to keep you occupied if you're looking for other things here on the feed that you might be interested in. And of course, give us your feedback, needssomeintroduction@gmail.com, or on YouTube. Leave us your comments down below. And of course, we had an excellent review. Thank you so much to ESDEV. Did I write that down? 27. I might have gotten those initials wrong, but thank you so much for the positive review on Apple TV. I mean, on the Apple Podcast app. And Sona, it's interesting. I noticed that so many people who've reached out to us recently are watching like multiple Severance podcasts, and that's how they encountered ours. And hey, if you're listening to, now that Severance is done, rather than listening to 10 podcasts about one show, hey, just put us in the mix every once in a while with our other shows we'll be covering.
And if I could just chime in on the review issue, I am not going to derail us. I know I took you off guard a little bit last week because I really needed to get it off my chest that I had certain feelings about certain reviews. I just want to say how much I appreciate everyone who's taken the time to leave a review either on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, or by emailing you. I said before, and I'll say again, I think when you leave a positive review, it's done completely out of kindness. It's a very selfless thing to do, to take time out of your day to share positive feedback. And it's very, very much appreciated. Everyone had a lot of really kind, sweet things to say. And please know how much every single one of those comments made my day.
Yeah. Thank you so much once again for all that feedback. I have my notes, Sona. Many notes. Here's my notebook, which is disappearing because of the weird effect here. Oh, by the way, the background I have here, I last week went out to the Lumen facility here in New Jersey, visited there. This is actually a night shot when we were leaving, and have some, maybe make some YouTube shorts out of it. Went inside, and very cool what they've done inside, created this urban space. It appears that they started shooting a lot of the interiors when it was still pretty empty. And now I assume when they shoot there now, a lot of this is CGI to make it look the way it does on the show. But it's very recognizable as the Lumen facility, and a very cool location as well. So keep your eyes peeled for more YouTube content covering all of that. All right, Sona, let's start with, as I mentioned, Cold Harbor, the name of the episode, directed by Ben Stiller, as we'd expect at this point for some of these really important episodes. What were your general impressions of this? 76, indeed, it was 76. It was including the featurette at the ending and the previously on, a very long previously on. It was like 85 minutes long. This is a very long episode of television. What did you think?
I loved it. I really, really loved it. I do have some constructive criticism, maybe, about a couple of aspects of the show. But all in all, I loved what they did. I think there were parts of the episode that were really funny. There were parts of the episode that were heartbreaking, which is the word I read online as how critics described the finale. And there certainly were. heartbreaking moments as well. I mean, I just felt like I went on a whole journey during
Yep.
this 70 some minutes of every emotion you could possibly feel. I think they packed a ton in, and I'm really happy with how they left things for season three. I think there's a lot of ground still left to cover with
Yep.
where they've left this story. So I'm excited to see what comes next, and I'm generally pretty satisfied with this season. What were your feelings?
Yeah, I have. I'll leave some nitpicks for the end, which I think you'll probably agree with. Most of them, I definitely had issues with parts of the episode. I didn't mind that it was as long as it was. I actually had suspected there would be so much plot and so many revelations and so many locations we were going to, which the show was not at all. Instead, it kind of luxuriated in these specific, very
Yeah,
long scenes,
yes,
but I
some
like that.
very
I
long
like what they
scenes.
spent the time on, the character development, more the focus of it. And as you mentioned, there's all these new potential directions for the following season to go into. So I think they left it in a really good place. I do have some issues with this episode, and maybe now in retrospect with the season as well, and which were kind of exemplified here in this episode. But
Yeah,
overall, I thought it
same.
was satisfying. I think the audience will mostly embrace this. All right, the first scene I want to start breaking down, and there's really many of these signature scenes, very memorable moments here, but in these longer scenes between usually just two characters. Once again, these dynamics of pairing up or maybe having 3-on-1, and very interestingly, sometimes having the same Innie and Audi talking to himself, or in these cases, very interesting aspect of this as well, different versions of the same person. But I want to start things off continuing with the scene we saw between Helly and James, her dad, or her Audi's dad, in here. A few really interesting things that happened. First of all, Helly has her hackles up. She's like, "You're so weird." I like the fact that she had her guard up and really not, not very wary of having this weirdo there with her. But this was a very interesting scene. The things he said, first of all, he doesn't love his daughter. It's a terrible thing to say to Helly about Helena herself. Another interesting aspect was that he's disappointed in her because when she was young, he saw some element of Kier in her, this reincarnation perhaps of the Kier character, and that it wasn't there anymore. As she got older, it disappeared, whatever that thing was. And that he has tried many times. We know there was a clue there from
Yeah.
last week that he has been trying to sire many children. He specifically mentions it here, and it's never worked out. He's never found another one of these Kier infused offspring. But he saw it in Helly when she was on stage angrily talking. And as a matter of fact, she tries to kill him with a pen at one point here, or at least threatens
Hmm.
to. And he goes, "There it is." So the thing that he's looking for is this rebelliousness, this anger that is in her, which is very intriguing. So, what did you make of this interaction?
I loved all of her responses to him here. She's not intimidated by him at all. She's clearly freaked out by him and communicating that. I'm concerned about how many children are we talking about that this man has had. This is like starting to seem like an Elon Musk situation, maybe even
Yes.
beyond that. Uh, and I think it raises an interesting question that is really a theme of this episode. And I would say maybe one of my comments about this is that I wish this theme had been more directly touched on throughout the season of the inside version versus the outside version, and how the essence of who you are is maybe not changeable between those
Right.
two versions, right? And I think that's really head on addressed in this episode in so many
Yep.
contexts that I'm fascinated by the idea. There's all of these Severance super fans, right, who are looking
Yeah.
for the Easter eggs and like, oh,
Right.
this book was on the bookshelf in the background and all of that. But for me, what's really interesting is this idea of, that we talk about so much culturally. Can people really change? Are people always who they are? The whole tale of the scorpion and the frog. Do you know that story that
Yes.
you tell the kids, right? Like
Yeah.
you are who you are. and there's nothing that can change
It's
it.
in my nature.
Right. I think it's such a fascinating idea that I loved this context to bring it up in, as well as the other context that it came up in this episode.
Yeah, I think what's intriguing about it too, we see all the negative sides of Severance, that these people are enslaved, etc. But then you think about the fact that are these innies some non-corrupted version of the original person, right? So when he is saying, "I see in you what I used to see in my daughter," when Dylan later on is saying
Mhm.
that you are the better version of me. You, that
Mhm.
Innie is the better version. My wife is attracted to that version. It is, and maybe this Mark, the Audi Mark, the Innie Mark is the purer version of him as well. So he doesn't like he's not, and he's not appreciating that aspect of himself in this, of course, because he has his own agenda. But yeah, I think that is very intriguing. The idea that that there is some additional upside to this is that you may be like the compromised version of your middle-aged self is non-existent in this in the Innie.
Right. Like before you've dealt with any traumas that have happened to you, before somebody or something dampened your spirit, who would you be
Right.
if
Exactly.
it was just the essence of who you are without all those outside forces shaping who you are?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and it's very intriguing. And I think this is one of the things I really want to see explored. And I have a theory. I'll leave it for the very end, but get a theory as to a direction they could go into where, because, I'll just jump to the end momentarily, but you see these two crazy kids running off into the sunset hand in hand as the alarms are blaring. And I'm like, where exactly are they going?
What's the end game? What
Right.
is the end game?
So maybe there is an end game possibly here, maybe, or blackmail, I'll say. But anyway, I'll leave that for theories and speculation on season 3 at the end. All right. Of course, the next scene we go to from there, I definitely want to talk about a very long scene, which I loved every second of, which is where we continue the Innie Audi Mark experience. He's in that birthing cabin. He's there with Cobell and Devin, and they are trying to convince Innie Mark. He's got his hesitancy about going forward with this, and they go, "Well, watch this video and see what your Audi has to say about it." And this was just the performance here. Adam Scott's performance here is so impressive. The two different versions of himself and how they're so happy to be talking to each other finally, but then how it curdles over time. And these really, really great questions that all these philosophical questions we've been asking about this, that, Innie Mark is no dum-dum. He is asking very pressing questions here for him. What'd you think?
I love the idea of this, how they did this with the camera so that they could talk to each other. I love the comment at the beginning, and it might have been in the last episode as well, of like, you can leave, but the other version of you is just going to walk right
It's
back
just
in
going to walk
here.
back in
So
here.
it doesn't really matter. I like the idea of like, take 2 steps out the door. It's a new version of you that's going to record another video and come back in. I liked the tempo of it, how,
Mm-hmm.
it started out being kind of like longer videos, and towards the end, we are just seeing little snippets of them getting annoyed with each other.
And it's
And
as if
yeah,
they're having a conversation. You're like intercutting between their two sides. It's very clever the way they did that. Yeah.
yeah. And I thought also, like you did, that the acting was great. I was remembering how I was first introduced to this actor in Parks and Rec,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if I ever thought he would
Right.
be doing something like this. I think it's amazing. And yeah, I think they really are head on addressing this idea of like, well, are you, you're the creator now since you're the outside version and
Right.
you get to say how everything goes. Like
Right.
you can't create me and then expect me to not have feelings and opinions and thoughts and wants and needs and just, treat me like a doll, right? But that seems to be what the outside versions of people think they can do. So I liked all of it, with my thematic thing being like I think they started all of this really well in the
Mm-hmm.
first season. And we
Yeah.
had talked about this a couple of episodes ago with the protests about the
Yeah.
severance and the political candidates. And I feel like I would have liked to have seen that worked in a little bit during this season, because this feels like a lot to do now, as much as I enjoyed it. And I think they even could have done it had the Dylan storyline come earlier,
Yeah.
maybe, because that also touches on so many of the same ideas. I think even that would have helped me because I feel like so much of this season felt to me like it was for the super fans,
Yeah.
uh, where, this idea to me kind of fell by the wayside. Like, of course,
Yeah.
we always know it's there. That's the premise of the show. But it wasn't being directly addressed head on the way they went like guns blazing into this issue last night.
Right. Yeah. And I think that and that'll be my critique here too, that the more fan servicey elements of this episode and of the season were probably where I bumped up against it the most. And these are the things I like the most, exactly like you mentioned, these themes of what do you owe to each other and to this version of yourself, right? And in some ways, if we are making the direct correlation that this is the adolescent version of somebody, that is what James is seeing in Helly, and maybe what Gwendolyn, is that her name? Gretchen is seeing in her any version of her husband. And maybe Irv, once again, also not this bitter, hardened guy who's been to war, presumably, or at least in the military, this earlier version of himself as an innie. So in general, what do we owe that earlier version of ourselves, right? The idea that we are now this is also parenting and child, that relationship as well. But the idea of saying that, well, I'm the parent or I'm the one who's in control, therefore I make all the decisions. And Innie Mark makes the very intelligent argument here multiple times. One, that you don't know how this thing works, first of all. Second of all, the idea that what am I just going to be a bunch of memories in your head? Like what happens to me, to my agency? And then, of course, the idea that even if Audi Mark is saying like, no, we're sharing it, is like, hold on a second. So you have 40 something years of life and I have, a couple of years, part of a day for a year or so, 2 years. So hours of life in like intermingled, like if you look at a file storage system, like just like these random files here and there, how much agency is he really going to have? And that is an intriguing story too, because it does make me wonder, even if they somehow integrated the idea that being like, well, is this little part of him then just like this subset of his memories, or does this part of him, which has some level of agency, who loves Helly, for example, now that's an internal conflict between these two versions of himself, right? That I think that even his Audi, the idea of integration has way more consequences than he can possibly imagine.
Yeah, I think two things I want to say in response to that. I agree with all of it. I liked the point that the inside version made. You unilaterally decided I'm miserable down here. What if I'm not? Have you thought of that? Like,
Right.
you have, as you said, you have no idea what's happening here. And also, and this is my other main constructive comment about the show, this reintegration thing, man. Like, I just feel like the way it was presented earlier in the season was like, again, full speed ahead, the reintegration is happening. But then in this specific episode, especially with the two versions talking to themselves, before they specifically addressed the reintegration, I was kind of like, so what? The reintegration didn't happen whatsoever? I don't understand. And then to their credit, they did specifically address it, but I wasn't very satisfied with
Yeah.
how they addressed it. I feel like it was not as well thought out or maybe well paced as it could have been.
Yeah. Yeah. I think up until, if we would review the series through the prism of this episode, exactly what you just said, through the reintegration moment, the show is extremely well paced. And then we have the Orkbo, which of course is like the conversation moment for the season. But then I feel like even at that moment, the show starts to change its focus, I think. And that wasn't necessarily where it was at its strongest. And exemplified by the point you make that we have this reintegration process begin, and then it just kind of, they're like, well, it's going to take a little bit longer, and what does reintegration mean? And we do see it slipping in both directions, right? We do see that there's that moment where the innie version of him is like losing time. But then I guess that may very well have been the Audi remembering something that the innie did. So even then, it feels like this is not happening for the innie. It's really only happening for the Audi, which reinforces the innie's argument that, what's the point of it? And by the way, I we're again jumping to the end, but I agree with his decision to run away with Helly, because even if this ends in 45 minutes from now, like they just run away together and hide out in there for an hour or two or spend the weekend there together, whatever that is. I mean, if he walks out the door, Lumen's not going to let him back in again. That's not going to happen. So even if it's 45 minutes, it's 45 minutes that he's not going to get if he walks out that door.
And even if he was let back in again, you are putting yourself at the mercy of outside Mark, who has been reunited with his wife, his decisions, right? I mean, he doesn't have to send him back in. So it's, a certainty versus a lot of uncertainty.
I also like the fact that when he ends the conversation, you see the very true to the Mark character himself, that he's basically saying, like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. If you ever want to see your wife again, the next time I wake up, I want to be on the severed floor. And of course, that's exactly what happens. But I do like the fact that oftentimes, Mark is making decisions to run away from painful reality. And you see it with the Audi, and then you see it with the innie as well, because what Cobell tells him right before he makes a decision is, I can understand he doesn't want to hear it from Cobell, but everything she says is 100% true. And by the way, as the audience, it also just lays out everything we've been speculating about, that the files are actually Gemma, that there's more context there, that every time he cleans one of these files, he's actually creating yet another severed version of Gemma. And they need 25 of them. I don't know why they need 25 of them. They probably don't actually need 25 of them. Maybe he's just so good at this, he's made more versions than anyone else has ever seen before. But that is just a unique, whatever is unique about it. And of course, we still don't know, why was Gemma targeted? How did they know that Mark would follow her in, that Mark would be able to do this? We still don't know any of that. That's all questions for the following season, I presume. But I do find it interesting that what Cobell says, that not only that, but now that her files are cleansed and this process is complete, it's not like you're going to continue to just be innie Mark forever. It's like they don't need you anymore. Do you think they're going to keep you around? So one way or the other, he's probably not going to innie Mark. That is, probably has a pretty low shelf life. So all of this is extremely like tragic in a way, because it's like he can't be with Helly no matter what. They're not going to let Helena Egan continue to have this innie Helly just to have a romance with the innie. Like that's not going to happen either. So none of this seems to be.
Why would Helena want to?
Right. It's like this. Yeah. Why would she go back in ever? And they're not going to just let her stay down there forever either, because they need her to be the CEO when she exits the building. Right. So none of this is going to end well. There will be no honeymoon ending for you, Marquez or Helly.
So here's my question about how this all worked with Gemma.
Mm-hmm.
I understand it conceptually, I think. Ms. Casey, was she created by this process?
I don't know. Well, what's weird about it is when you're on the severed floor, you're severed. And we kind of speculated on this. When you descend, then do you become another version, or do you become your outside self? We know it's the outside self because when Miss Casey descends downwards, she becomes Gemma. And of course, we see it here too. When Mark descends, he turns back into his Audi. So the elevator is just a switch on, switch off. Now, I don't know if Miss Gemma, I should say, if Gemma has some additional aspect to the implant that allows these creating of these different selves. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that works, but I don't think that Miss Casey was just one of the rooms she walked into
from the refining process or whatever they call it.
Yeah, I don't think so. I assume that she probably just got a regular severance. She goes down to
She has a 9 to 5.
Yeah, she just goes down to she's Miss Casey in that floor, and then the cleansing of the files, however that works, is to create these other versions of herself
In
in the
all the
chip.
rooms.
Yeah. But like basically everybody gets the generic Severance is the Miss Casey. And then the whatever is additionally happening with the cleansing is allowing her to enter these other rooms and have these different versions.
I mean, this poor woman, they're asking a lot of her. She's got to be Miss Casey plus 25 other versions of herself.
25 other people, exactly. And each one of them is has her own personal hell she has to live through.
Eek.
Oh, but a couple more things about the interactions there, specifically with Cobell. I loved how they are together because, of course, he has this toxic relationship with Cobell. Cobell does the, tough love thing and also, calls him out on the fact that he, there's not going to be a honeymoon ending for you. But then in the final moments when he really loses his cool, she once again says, I care for you, Mark. And I really think she meant that. And we've seen it multiple times. Just I think when I rewatched, I was surprised actually, episode 2 maybe of my season 1 rewatch. There's a scene where she's at the window in her house alone, and Mark is coming inside, and she's standing by the window crying, watching Mark. So she is really tortured by what she's done. And I don't know if maybe he was just a lab rat and spending all this proximity to him made her have this empathy towards him. But I think she really does care about him and really did want him, by the way, in season 2, when he says, I'm going to I'm done with it. I'm going to quit Lumen. She has this like look of relief. She takes a big sigh and she goes, good for you. And she gives him a hug. And that's when his Audi emerges in the final episode of season 1. But when she gives him that hug, I think she really does want him to quit. It also kind of lets her off the hook as well for whatever this experiment that she's been running as well.
Yeah, she probably, two things. She probably does have conflicting feelings about all of this now that we know she is the originator of the severance process.
Right.
And probably also relating to his grief, as well on some level. Sure. She's still dealing with everything that happened with her mom, so I think sometimes it's easier to transfer those feelings to somebody else when you identify with them so well rather than deal with them inside yourself.
Yeah. And I agree. I think that a lot of that has to do with this loss she felt for her mom that she never got over. And of course, that's part of the reason she's crying. Even when we see her earlier on, she is, feeling that loss that he is experiencing is triggering it in her as well. And of course, we see a mirror image of this to some extent. Dylan tried to quit last week, and he gets the note from his Audi. And this was really interesting, too, that you think the Audi is going to just be outraged, considering how angry he was in those final moments of last week. And instead he says, look, if you really want to quit, then that's okay. You can quit. But you are the better version of me. And it makes me feel good that you exist down there. And so I recommend that you don't. And this works. This actually keeps Dylan down there. And I find it very interesting that Dylan, in a way, Dylan is choosing to live this life, this compromised life for his Audi and for this wife, as opposed to Mark, who is not. And I think the dynamic there is what changes it, right? In a weird way, the fact that and Audi Mark are both in love with the same woman means that in a way, he's like, I don't mind living this life for you because it makes things better for her. And I'm sure he's still going to want to have visitations, but I think that that is what he feels like they're on the same page, as opposed to Mark is not like, I'm in love with Miss Casey and want to rescue her. Mark wants to be with Helly, and Audi Mark wants to be with Miss Casey / Gemma. And those are not the same agenda at all.
Yeah, I loved everything about this scene. I loved the insight that the outside version of Dylan has, which wasn't something we haven't seen that much of Dylan in the outside world. I actually would like to see more, but he hasn't been portrayed as a super insightful character.
Yeah.
So I liked how he put all of this into writing. I like the thoughtfulness behind it. I also have to comment on how Milchick sprinted out of the room after dropping the note because he may have an emotional reaction. And I don't know if he also needed to get to the marching band. I'm not sure. But
I think he had a busy day.
Full on sprint. Yeah. I mean, he said something like that I have a lot of demands on my time today and sprinted out. I also love that. But I liked the sentiment, and I liked that he left it as an open question, and they specifically showed us that neither box was checked about accepting or denying it, that
Right.
he was recognizing the autonomy of that other version of himself and saying,
Yeah.
I can't make the decision for you. It wouldn't be fair, but here's what I think, and here's what I wish you would do. But ultimately, the choice is yours.
And I think this is interesting that this lighter touch between the two, it worked in a way. I think there's also a lesson here, basically, in this episode, that by giving the innie that option, it empowered the innie, as opposed to outside Mark being like, all these compromises. Trust me, trust me. Well, I don't have to go back in again. I'm the one who makes a decision. And all of this, and even Cobell being like, you're just going to be turned off anyway. You don't have any autonomy. Like, telling someone they have no options is not a way to motivate people, as opposed to Dylan being like, I need you to do this for me. And I understand why you want to leave. So it's up to you. And the Innie Dylan's going, then he comes to his own inception of the idea, basically being like, I'm going to walk out of here and turn myself off. Why would I do that? Right. So it gives him at least agency in his, even if there's only one choice, it makes him feel like he's making a choice, as
Right.
opposed to Innie Mark, who's rebelling angrily against this whole situation. So yeah, so obviously a parallel there between the two interactions between these innies and outies, and I thought really brilliant to just explore these ideas without putting its thumb on a scale or whatever, just kind of illustrating the differences between these two interactions. I loved it. Mark, of course, does indeed show up back at the office, and Helly is there. I have got questions as to what the timeline is for all of this. Dylan is there. Is this the middle of the night? Is this? I don't know when this is happening.
I've given up on understanding the timeline of this show, or even what year the show is set in. I am just going for the ride with it, whenever it may be, wherever it may be, all of it. Just show me the plot.
By the way, I just want to call out one thing, because there are still people on Reddit and stuff that are saying this is the 90s, this is this is that. This is modern. It's contemporary times. It is obviously like an alternate history, but it is contemporary times because we saw Mark's driver's license in an earlier episode, and it was issued in 2020. Issued in 2020. So this is happening sometime after 2020. It is basically contemporary times. It's not the 1990s. I just want to call that out because people still argue about this. I understand their intent. The show has, for a while, intentionally made us feel like this is an abandoned place. This is by the way, very true to life. I think I've told this story on the podcast already, but I worked consulting at IBM, one of the IBM offices, and it was exactly like this. The town, it's like some of the cars in the parking lot were the rental cars for if someone went to pick you up or you borrowed a car because you were working as a consultant. The cars were really old, like an old Oldsmobile from the 1990s was still sitting there. That's the car you ended up getting. And like I mentioned there too, upstairs, everybody's got laptops, everything's pretty modern equipment. And I worked in databases. So you go down below and you go work with the database, and they have mainframes from the 1970s down there, in these overheated rooms. So it is like, it's just an old complex, and they've never modernized it, apparently. So that's why you have this mix of, smartphones, but these analog screens from the 1990s and 80s, maybe even in some cases. But I think that's why you're seeing that. It's true to these companies that have been around for a long time that they don't upgrade their equipment. They only upgrade the stuff they have to, or if it's brand new. Everything else is legacy and old and out of date. So Helly is there. Going back to the plot there, Helly's there, and Mark has finished the file, is in the process of finishing it. They are talking to each other, filling each other in on what happened. I saw Helena's dad. Oh, speaking of Helena, just the name Helena, I did want to shout this out. I totally forgot to bring it up, but I loved in the fact when they're going back and forth, the trigger of when Mark Innie gets turned off, when that nice conversation, like, oh, wow, we're discovering so many things about each other. When things go ugly, it is exactly a mirror image of what happened when Mark met Helena on the outside, where they're flirting and everything's going great. And then he goes, yeah, your wife, Hannah. And she's like, Gemma. And that's when everything turned ugly. And of course, he's just like, hey, didn't you fall in love with someone down there? I think her name is Helene. And as soon as he got the name wrong, he's like, you are not giving me the amount of consideration that I deserve.
I'm with them as someone who has struggled with people properly getting my properly saying my name my entire life. I get it. Sometimes it just flips a switch in you.
But there he is with Helly, and Helly is doing a really good job of getting him to comply with what they want. She's saying, like, what else can we do? And I liked when she says to him, the very great scene, just a terrific scene when they're talking, like whispering back and forth, and he's finishing the file, but yet still hesitating to finish it. And she says that we'll still know each other on the outside. And he goes, but that's not the same thing. And she says, she is me. What did you think about that?
I actually found that a little bit confusing. Did you understand that?
I'm a little confused. I liked the scene, and yet I'm not sure what she's trying to say. Is she accepting the fact that this person that she finds so disgusting is some aspect of her? And did the conversation with the dad somehow force her to make that revelation about herself? And maybe be a little more empathetic towards that version of herself on the outside. Maybe hearing this guy say, I don't love my daughter, and then her realizing, like, oh, I think Helena is this monster on the outside. She's just an unloved girl. Well, how would I feel in that instance? So maybe she is acknowledging that they have more in common than she would have, definitely earlier in the season, where she despises this outside character.
I think that interpretation makes sense. I wouldn't have expected it in the context of that specific conversation.
Right.
So, yeah, I didn't quite know what to make of that comment, to be honest.
But doesn't she have to? I mean, isn't she just trying to accept it at some point? Because she has to understand, if that file is complete, is Helly? Why would they keep Helly around? Like, what's Helly there for? Doesn't make any sense. And she already knows that her outside version of herself could care less if she drops dead. She's like, as long as you don't injure me, which of course she can by injuring herself. But, there's nobody's looking out for any Helly. So does she just know that there's a expiration date on all of this? So at least we could do this.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one.
I know. It is.
I do know that I love the card that Milchick gave to Mark when he arrived. Have I skipped ahead with the card of that signed "Love, Mr. Milchick"?
No, he's there. He's back already.
Yeah. Did you notice that there was a three-dimensional waffle inside the card?
Yes. It's like, you got a waffle party. Well,
I was expecting a waffle party.
So
what we got ended up being way beyond what a waffle party is. But I love the idea that he's trying to bring some humanity to this by giving him the card, signing it "Love, but Mr. Milchick."
Right.
All of it I thought was fantastic.
And then that's when he finishes the file. He does finally decide to. I like the fact that she's the one who does the last, and she recognizes that at least it's a happy one. So this was a good memory, the final memory that got cleansed here. And like you mentioned, that this is a very weird. This whole sequence is pretty crazy. All of it. It starts with Milchick comes in. We hear that song. I forget the name of it, but it's actually by the Alan Parsons Project. But it is the music that the Bulls used to come into. So maybe Milchick is a big Bulls fan. But the music starts playing, and they have this animatronic Kier there who insults the fact that he's too verbose. Even the animatronics are rude, but Milchick defends himself and goes,
racist, yeah.
Hey, how about, yeah, definitely the racist element of it as well. I like the fact that Milchick doesn't take it laying down, though. He says, well, maybe you should be a little more realistic about how tall you are. And I like that the animatronic reacts to this, going like, okay, I take your comment. I'll take that. I'll take that critique. And of course, this all leads to a 200-person marching band coming in. This scene was insane.
I mean, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
I could never have predicted it, like so much in this show. So, okay, another question. Does this marching band reside on the severed floor?
It apparently does. They are from
Merriment and choreography.
Choreography and merriment, or vice versa. Yeah. Yes. So these are all severed people, and I think that they are all severed people, which is insane. That they have. Here's the biggest takeaway for this whole entire episode. They have a whole department for choreography and merriment. Just these group of people, hundreds of them apparently, and they have one security guard.
My takeaway was, Dylan was saying, who am I going to meet down here? But apparently there's tons of people he
plenty,
could meet
plenty
down
of
there.
people. Exactly. Who knew? Who knew? They must have been imported from somewhere else, but who knows how big this complex
Maybe
is.
they were flown in or something.
I got to tell you, I didn't go into the lower floors, obviously, of this actual complex back here, but this place is massive. So if there really was like this maze-like structure on the first floor, one of the floors of this building, you probably could have hundreds and hundreds of people in there, and you would not even never run out of space. So who knows? Who knows? We see Milchick with some more dance moves here. Definitely
Amazing.
appreciated that.
So amazing. I could have watched 10 minutes of that solid. It was a long scene, though.
Did you recognize this song? I tried to track it down. Apparently, they say it was an original composition for the show. When they first come in, that seemed like a recognizable song that I've heard before, and I could not place it. Maybe someone will track it down.
Yeah, I don't have a specific recollection of it. I think I was too overwhelmed processing what was happening.
And Helly says, "We got to get out of here." She grabs his walkie-talkie, runs into the bathroom. He goes in after her. She's able to lock him in there, hold the handle for just so long. But of course, Dylan has arrived in the meantime and brings the snack machine.
Saves the day again.
Again, exactly. And Mark, of course, has taken the map and is trying to find his way to that hallway. Oh, another thing I forgot to bring it up earlier, the map to the hallway. When Mark mentions this to Cobell is shocked. She had no idea that Bert had this map. So it's not like she's been conspiring with any of these Audis or whatever. That they seem to be that they didn't know about this.
Yeah, also on these scenes, I want to say I'm so impressed with Dylan's upper body strength, lower body strength, full body strength. I don't know, but there's no way I could push a vending machine the way he did. Super impressed with that. Also, so this is another comment I have about this season. We had been speculating that maybe Milchick had reached his limit and was going to understand that maybe Lumen is not working for the greater good and kind of switch his loyalty. But here he was pretty much a company guy trying to do everything he possibly could to get out of that bathroom.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that Milchick, of all the characters here, especially given some of the character development this year, got short shrift, especially later in the season. And I assume they're still just planting seeds because even here, even in this episode, we still see that he is approaching some kind of breaking point. So I think it's still coming. And especially there's that moment when the red light starts flashing and it's like, oh, the gig is up. And there's a moment where it looks like he may just, I was thinking maybe he'll even turn the tables at that point and help them out in some way. But no, but then he like doubles down on this commitment and he starts to kick his way out. So I think we're illustrating again that there is this duality to him. Every character here, obviously, whether they're any Audi or just individuals, they have these dualities. Cobell, for example, and Milchick, I think, has it also. But I don't think that I don't think that they've developed him enough. I think this is all setting up for season 3.
It may be part of an arc. It just seemed like such a huge way to double down.
Yes.
That I was kind of surprised about it, given what we've seen for his character this season. Maybe a little more conflict, I think, would have made sense.
Yeah.
Even if the end result was the same.
Meanwhile, during all of this, a few other things are happening in parallel. First of all, Gemma's getting ready for her final entry into this cold storage. They've given her an outfit. She rejects it. She wants to go in her regular outfit. They don't seem to push back that much. Drummond has found this like secret room where James is sitting there watching. This is, the only people who are watching this apparently. So once again, I wonder, maybe I'll leave that for later. I do wonder how many people in Lumen know about this, what's happening here. And maybe that's why there's such a lack of security, but because this is all happening nefariously, even within the organization itself, because man, these people need to get higher security, especially after the Ortbo and the end of season 1. You figure they would have had some more.
Yeah, maybe just shuffle the people you have even. You don't necessarily have to hire somebody new, just. It's kind of like the White Lotus situation. You just got one guy in the security booth. When he leaves, there's just nobody there. But I think, unless I'm jumping ahead, what they wanted Gemma to do was put on the coat she was wearing the last time she saw Mark.
Oh, interesting. Yes, maybe that's what she was
So
wearing
they
in that
flashed
episode.
back to that scene of her saying goodbye to
Huh.
Mark in their house for
Oh, maybe
just
to
a
make an
quick couple
additional
seconds.
connection to,
Yeah.
yes, that would make sense. Yep. And that final room that she goes into is to dismantle the crib that we saw him struggling to assemble in that excellent Miss Casey episode. So, of course, this is theoretically her most painful memory, and that this is directly addressing it, and that she just does it without thinking is interesting. Of course, and more interesting is this the way that the Egan character is talking about how, oh, we've done it, we've overcome pain or emotional pain, I think is what he says. So it is interesting that their goal here, and maybe that is where there's some commentary here as well with even having innies. The goal is, how can we separate ourselves from the pain that we live in our lives, which is such a strange philosophy to have, although I think people do have it. This idea that if you just outsource your pain and all the inconvenient things in your lives, isn't that what makes you the person you are to some extent? And so anyway, just interesting that this device, potentially the goal of it is just to separate everybody from their painful memories. And of course, there's two sides to that. One is, why would you want to do that when you have to take the good with the bad in life? I think that's what makes us who we are. And second of all, the idea that you're not, the Audi, does not experience that pain, but then you have this version who is experiencing all that pain, only that pain, right? So it really is uh, interesting to consider.
But it's kind of the reverse of what we were saying as far as Dylan is concerned, right? The inside version, and kind of what we were talking about just about several of the scenes earlier. The inside version of the data refiners is the version of them that has not experienced, theoretically, the trauma, the pain. So it's kind of the flip side, right? Instead of creating a version that is there to experience the trauma and the pain, in refinement, it's all the versions of them that have not experienced trauma and pain to the extent that is capable of being completely severed.
Well, yeah, the innocence. Well, that's an interesting point too, right? Because if the goal theoretically would be to create this pure version of yourself and then make that your Audi version, but then it
Right. The
doesn't
outside
have
version of you turns into the inside version we currently
right,
have.
right.
It's
But
a
then
thing.
you also that inside the only trick there is it gives you the pure you know version of that person, the more uncorrupted, let's say, version of that person theoretically, but it simultaneously doesn't have that context, right? So it's like, for example, Innie Mark, of course, is separated from the pain of Audi Mark, that loss that he suffered. But that doesn't mean that now that person can go out and be like, see, you're cured. It's like, how is it cured? I don't have the original memory. I'm not the same person anymore, right? So it's an interesting duality there.
It
And
is.
of course, the opposite, where you'd have someone only experiencing the pain, like
Right.
you have somebody only there for the childbirth, and then you turn them off afterwards. So it's just like this person has only had this discomfort, and but then made a life out of it, and then when you're done with them, you just turn them off, which is of course the cruelty of it.
I mean, that poor version of Gemma that was like, wasn't I just in the dentist chair? I don't understand. Why am I
Right.
always at the dentist? Right.
Exactly.
I do want to say, I've talked before about my experience with infertility and having this be the final test
Yeah.
as someone who has not been there in this exact context, but a very similar context, breathtakingly painful, like the cruelest thing I
Yeah.
could possibly imagine doing to a woman struggling with infertility. I understand why that would be the ultimate test. It makes sense, it tracks, but I just have to say the cruelty of this to me is mind-boggling.
And the fact that she doesn't react to it, she just does it.
Yeah.
They even compliment themselves about it, like the
Yeah.
boundaries holding, right? That they're so
Yeah.
proud of the fact that they're not seeing any emotional reaction on her part. And then, of course, Mark makes his way to, he thinks he's at the right door. He's not quite at the right door. I find this sequence funny where Drummond, who has now we find out what the goats are for. But pretty anticlimactic, I got to say. The people who have whole podcasts just speculating on what is the true calling, what's the true nature of this goats. I've got to be very disappointed to be like they're sacrificial lamb / goats.
I was so pleasantly surprised by the ultimate conclusion of the goats. I really, as I saw them, I saw the one kid. Is that what a baby goat is
Yes.
called?
Mm-hmm.
Kid.
Yeah.
As I saw the kid in the cart being wheeled down, I was kind of like, here we go with the freaking goats
Which was the
again.
teaser, by the way.
And
Apple had a
yes,
teaser earlier this week
yes.
with just the goats, right?
And I was very satisfied with how it all worked out with the goats and with the goat herder.
Yep.
Amazing.
What a comeback for her.
Yes.
No more killing. Yeah, so this whole sequence is pretty fun. I agree. I think it's kind of anticlimactic and simultaneously it doesn't put the show in some crazy, like people are like, they're cloning people. They grow the goats and then they become the people. Like it's all these crazy speculation and this, it's like, nope, it's some kind of religious imagery there of the lamb. Not the I guess it's ironic because the goat herders, right? But it's in the little image we see, it's the person being led by the goat. So they have a goat. It's like almost, I guess, like when the Egyptians used to bury their dead with, with some kind of animals as well to like help be their pets in the afterlife or whatever. So they breed these goats. They look for the ones that have the most wiles and the most vigor. Is that what the ones they were talking about? And then they bring them there. But it's interesting, some of the clues there where she says, no more killing. How many more of these do you need? Which indicates that they've been killing a lot of people. This isn't like the second time she's done this. It sounds like she's done this a bunch of times. She's tired of the killing. So how many people?
She's sacrificing her favorite goat time and time again.
But each one of those theoretically is a person that's attached to them. So how many people have been killed along the way? Yes. So this is extremely nefarious where they're murdering people after they're done with these experiments. So if we needed any proof that Lumen is extremely bad, this is a part of that. And of course they're sacrificing her, saying she is all for the greater good. Like she's this is all her, she's going to be led to Kier. I had a question about all of that though. Maybe we'll leave it for the end, but if they're killing all these people, I don't know. Like this is, in a way, it worries me that the mythology is that they are murdering all these people. And why do they have to kill them, right? I mean, I guess you don't want, other than the practical fact that these people are going to walk out into the wild, to go out into the outside world and say, you know what happened to me while I was in there and this leaking out. Do you think they're just pragmatically killing them, or do they need to extract? There was something about extracting the chip, which kills them. Do they need the chip back as part of this process?
Yeah, I guess I got the sense that they're continually working to improve the chip, and when you remove the chip, it kills them, I guess.
And we do see that in the actual chip being removed from Mark's head in the trailer itself. So maybe that is something that is being teased, that eventually the chip will come out. And I assume in Mark's case, he might survive it. And maybe that's all set up for season 3. Maybe they're teasing it out even there in the trailer. But I was curious as to, like, do they need to remove the chip? If the chip kills her, do they need to remove her chip? Because when she walks off the severed floor, like all these other severed people, and apparently there are thousands or maybe even more people around the world who are severed. So people know what this procedure is like. I assume these people haven't all died. That would be very suspicious. So only some of them have died. Anyway, so I guess that all is one of the big mysteries that I need to understand more of in season 3. Why does she need to die here as part of this end of her? And of course, because she's been participating in this, assuming, I'm sure they've made promises to her for some things. She's not thinking she's going to be dead at the end. Explicitly, they tell her she's not going to be dead. They tell her she's going to be reunited with Mark.
Right, exactly. I don't know the volume of people we're talking about, because it seems like, they created this Miss Casey persona. Why can't she just live as Miss Casey for the rest of the time?
I figure it'd be less messy to actually killing her. That's what's odd about it. Yeah. And to the outside world, she is dead, right? They could just leave her down there as a permanently severed person.
Yeah.
So I guess we will have to learn about that later. But Mark follows the instructions, ends up at that other door right across the way where Drummond actually is. I like him trying to doing some physical comedy here, trying to crawl, push the frame open or something. I'm not sure what he's trying to do. And Drummond comes out and attacks him in the hallway. He's much bigger than Adam Scott is,
Didn't have a chance.
swinging him around like from one side to the other. And just as he's about to beat him to death, that's when the Gwendolyn Christie character, this goat herder, she intercedes. She has the gun that they use to kill the goat. By the way, this goat is adorable. I have to say, I like when they're doing their line. They're doing the lines, and the goat's kind of like climbing up, trying to get the attention of the person. Adorable goat. No wonder she didn't want to kill it.
Yeah.
And she intercedes, and Mark takes that gun and gets him to get on the elevator with him. What do you think about this fight sequence? Is this one of the comedic moments you thought? It gets pretty brutal.
I felt it was more serious than it was comedic, just because, it was so violent. But, I did cheer for the goat herder and came along at just the right time. And I think the goat survived too, right? So
you did. That the goat did survive.
All in all, a great day for her.
Exactly. I thought that the fight did start comedically, especially when he's like literally swinging him around from side to side like a child. But yeah, like when it gets really bloody and he looks like he's about to strangle him. And then when he also gets beat up very badly, the Drummond character, he's got like his eyebrows split open. So at that point, it gets pretty grisly. But something that is very funny is when he gets onto the elevator. And while he transitions from his Indy to his Audi, he accidentally kills this guy and gets showered in his blood. What a rude awakening for Audi. Mark.
Crazy way to transition. Yeah. I mean,
he wakes up.
Oh.
The last thing he did was get out to the elevator to go to work.
Right.
Now he's holding a gun to someone's neck, getting showered in blood. Could you imagine? You're like, what? How did we get here?
Yeah, the context cues of that are not really obvious.
He steps off the elevator. Pretty soon, he's like wandering around. What am I going to do? Of course, he recognizes the doors with the different files he's cleansed. So immediately he starts to run around looking for that cold storage room. He finds it.
So wait, something I liked about this and about other moments in the rest of the episode too are, remember in the very first episode of this season, he's running down the hallways.
Yes.
Like really, like the music was very happy though in that scene. Yeah. I liked the music.
Very jazzy.
It felt like zany almost the way he was running down all the hallways, but I felt like they kind of brought it full circle with the end of this episode and everybody's running down hallways and it's much, much more serious.
Yeah, there's so much hallway running here. And I think definitely you think about the very first episode and that very long sequence where he's running and running and running through those hallways. Very long.
Yeah.
We joked about it when we were doing that coverage. Like, is this 5 minutes of running through the hallways? I also like the fact when they actually teased that, they dropped that on Christmas Day as a little Christmas present. And it was 8 minutes long and 3 or 4 minutes of it was running through hallways. I'm like, well, they didn't really tell us that much. But yeah, definitely mirrored here with all of the running through hallways when he's like trying to remember or look at the map. And I never thought about that, by the way, the memorization of the map, getting to this location. And I'm like, just use the map. But even if I had the instructions in front of me, now having to reverse that on the way out, like that's a daunting task. As he gets to the cold storage room, Sandra Bernhardt is there. I like how she's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, open this door, open this door. She's just like, F you. And then she just starts screaming out, it's the spouse, it's the spouse. Which was one of the relatively few comedic scenes towards the end of the episode. Or I guess there was a lot of very darkly comedic scenes, I would say, towards the end of the episode. He does open the door innovatively, thinks about like, well, I do have all the Drummond's blood in my tie. I can use that to get it.
And I also felt like this tied back to how Mark and Gemma met donating blood. That there's kind of like a theme.
I didn't think of that, but that is interesting. Another blood connection there. And he walks in there. She has 5 minutes of memories at this point. And he's like, I'm here to help you, even though I'm soaked in blood. Trust me, it's okay. And I take my hand. And I just got distracted there for a second because I suddenly was remembering how sweet it was when Helly and Mark earlier were talking as he was finishing the file. And he's like, "What are you thinking about?" And she's like, "I'm just trying to remember any other places I know." Because remember, they asked them
Yeah.
like how when she was first born in that beginning of season one, she has no memory of any location. So she
Yeah.
understands what these a country is, etc., but they don't actually have any knowledge. And I guess it's seeping back in little by little as they last longer. More of these things come in, and she can think of only like I like that she can only think of a state
It's
and then
like
she goes
Delaware, Zimbabwe, and the equator.
and the equator. I love that.
Yeah.
And they're like, "What is the equator?" And she's like, "I don't know. Like it might be a building. It might be a building that got
Right,
so
right.
big it turned into a country."
Yeah,
So all of that was very cute, and of course, it pays
it
off at the
was
very
cute.
end. Yeah. But I just suddenly remember that for some reason, and yeah. But he's reunited with Gemma now. I my heart was literally racing in my chest when he couldn't get her to step out into the hallway. I'm like, "Oh my god, just
Yes,
step into the hallway!"
yes. So many thresholds involved in
Yes,
this
so many
episode.
thresholds. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's so funny to see in the featurette at the end, Ben Stiller talks about that the acting between these two performers, how they have to transition in just 2 or 3 scenes. They have all these different experiences. So you have she's on beyond the threshold. He's trying to coax her out. She steps through the threshold. She's like, "Oh my God, Mark." They kiss. It's like very romantic, very fun
Yes.
to see them reunited all of a sudden. And then, of course, they get into the elevator with Drummond's corpse. They are, kissing passionately. And then, of course, it's Miss Casey and Innie Mark. So now another dynamic
Yes.
completely.
Yes.
And incredible to see this actress, her face completely change into Miss Casey. And of course, Adam Scott also turning into the Innie. And what does she say? What is occurring?
Something like that. Yes.
Could you imagine Miss Casey waking up for the first time in God knows how long? And she's just like, "Okay,
Yeah.
Innie Mark. Mark is here, covered in blood. Drummond's in the elevator. This giant dead guy in the elevator with us. Yeah, but she doesn't ask too many questions. And of course, poor Miss Casey, that persona itself, of course, is going to disappear because she gets shuttled out the door. But then, the big decision. You have Gemma on the outside of the window. "Mark, come with me. Come with me, Mark. You're right there." But of course, it's
The
not
little
Mark.
window.
Yep. But it's not Mark. And Mark makes a different choice because he hears Helly call to him. She's there just to help him. She's just there, I think, just to encourage him. But that's not what he does.
Well, she never actually tells him to go.
That's true. Yeah. But I mean, she told him to go earlier, that
Yes.
he had to do this. But
Yeah.
in that moment, she just kind of smiles. She has that Helly smile, and they run off. Those crazy kids run off together as we see Gemma basically
Holding
framed in
hands.
the background, freaking out, pounding on the glass. And yeah, holding hands, running away, like just two crazy kids that have not a care in the world, or maybe just a
Well,
nihilistic ending for them in a way.
for a moment, they're both smiling, but
Yeah,
then by the end, they're serious again.
yeah. Because yeah, what's the plan? What's the plan?
What, yeah, what is the plan? Poor Gemma screaming in the back. I hope she gets out.
Yeah. So maybe that's where we leave things. So
I mean, that
some
lady doesn't know where she is or why she's there at this point, you know?
yep.
Go up, go down, who knows, right? Like,
Well, I mean, she literally tried to. I mean, think about it. The Gemma persona, almost killed that doctor
yeah.
recently and tried to escape. So
And
this
did
is
you
just
see
a
the little
continuing.
band-aid on his head?
Yes, yeah. With the little drop on it, the little
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
branded. Everything's branded. Yeah. So let's start off with nitpicks and questions I have. First of
Okay,
all,
I actually shared all my nitpicks while we talked, so this is
I
your time.
I have a couple, but questions I have for you too. You already brought one up right now, which is Gemma. She's outside that door. Is she safe? It's like we're like, oh, now she's safe. She's
I don't
safe.
think so.
She's on the Lumen facilities,
No,
right?
she's got to get the heck out.
Yeah, she has to run away as quickly as possible. What I was thinking in my head is that Cobell and Devin are nearby, and Cobell would know
That would
the
make sense.
exits, right? They're still inside. I mean, she's still inside the building, but that's a problem.
Yeah, it
But
was part of the plan was like you're going to take her to the exit stairway,
right,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, that's true. They probably are prepared for her to come out, but I don't know if they were prepared for her to lose all this time screaming for Mark. I mean,
Right.
a second felt like an eternity. So hopefully Lumen is as understaffed as they seem to be, and nobody is they don't have the resources to catch up to her, hopefully.
Yeah, and that's my big question, right? You would imagine if this place was a traditional type of conspiracy thriller type show where, all of a sudden the lights are blaring and every single agent is running through the hallways chasing them down, Gemma wouldn't make it a foot out the door,
Sure.
right? But
Yeah.
I have a feeling that she's going to go upstairs and that same security guard will be there and he'll be like, she's like, oh, I'm just here to see, just here to see my friends over there, and he'll be like,
Well,
okay,
I don't know what Cobell's status is at
right.
Lumen right now, but it's possible, like the way she said for Devin, she's one of James. Maybe she has some excuse for why she needs to get Gemma. I don't know.
Or she's going to yell at the security guard and just walk her out of there. And the security guard's not going to know what to do and is going to call maybe Milchick or something. And Milchick's got his hands full right now. So, but that was going to be my general question, was just like, do you think that if I'm pretty certain that Gemma's not going to be immediately swept up and
Agree.
brought back in there, that we would make this entire season practically feel like it was unnecessary. So I'm pretty sure that's not going to be the case.
Agree. And I think the possibilities for Gemma in the outside world are so great for season 3,
Right.
right? I'm not sure what will happen with Mark, but of her now being out there and trying to process everything that she's been through and
And rescue
figure out how
Mark
to reunite
possibly.
with Mark. Sorry?
And maybe needs to rescue Mark here. Now, maybe
Right,
the shoe's on
exactly.
the other foot.
Right.
Devin and her working together. I mentioned this in my analysis episode, but when Mark, or maybe I mentioned it in our conversations as well, when Devin asks Mark, who am I? Just a test that
Yeah,
he is actually Audi. He smiles at her and goes, Persephone.
right.
And Persephone, of course, is related to was abducted and by Hades and lived underground and didn't know that she had been trapped and is rescued later on. So the myth of Persephone ties into the show, but now maybe this is a reversal where we're thinking like, well, Persephone obviously is Gemma who needs to be rescued. Maybe Mark needs to be rescued by Devin in the next season. I think that's definitely a direction they're going to go in.
I could see that. It wouldn't surprise me.
If Gemma's out, though, they obviously are going to have some. Maybe they use Mark as a bargaining chip because if Gemma is now out, she can blow the whistle on Lumen big time. But I guess there are ways that they can manipulate her, and Mark is probably going to be the way they manipulate her to complying.
Maybe.
She's got to tell somebody, right? Although she's dead to the outside world, also she's got to admit that. I mean, those are the questions that we have to understand: is how did she get recruited? How did Mark get recruited? How did they know that the two of them would work in this regard? Maybe there was some kind of screening process, but how
I mean, there's
complicit?
the bare bones of it coming from
Yeah,
the fertility clinic
right.
and the things she got in the mail to fill
Yeah,
out.
yeah. Those cards that she somehow
Yeah,
was able to interpret probably correctly. But yeah, how would they know that Mark would? Because Mark's the one who's cleaning her files. So how would they
true.
know that? Unless it was just luck that he actually fell into their trap. But it feels like maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was all nudged in some way, and having Cobell live right next door might have been a way to nudge him in that direction as well. So that's all needs to be explained a little bit more. And what was Gemma's plan? Like, what did she think was going to happen to her? That if she was complicit in this and allowed her husband to know to believe she was dead, that's pretty damn cruel, I got to say.
There was a reference, I think, in this episode about her being kidnapped. Maybe I'm remembering wrong.
I think they say it like when they were like doing a rundown, like kidnap my wife, something like that. But
Oh, okay.
when the Innie and Audi were talking to each other, but was it a kidnapping? It seems when she walks out in that flashback that she knew she was headed. Maybe
Is
not
that
this
what side you come
specifically.
down on? Because we talked about at the time that
Yeah.
that scene could be read either way.
Yes, I mean, I guess there's a way to read it because I was torn on reading it that way as well. I guess you can read it that she's just feeling like, oh, there he is again. He's just kind of lost in his thoughts, and she's just acknowledging that they're in an awkward place in their relationship. But there seems something about it, like there was more portent to that scene from her perspective. It wasn't just like this is the last time I'm going to see her. In the context of the show, she seemed to be like communicating something to him there. So she knew something was going to happen. I'm not sure exactly, but I mean, if she knew that they were going to fake her death and everything, that's a really cruel thing.
Yes.
Oh, and here's the theory I was going to posit at the beginning with the whole Helly situation. What's interesting here is we know that the innies can live on the outside because of the Glasgow block.
I was
So
thinking about this too, the way the outside person can be on the inside and vice versa. But go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, so we've seen Helly go from one to the other, or Helena, I should say. But we now know that James does not love Helena and sees Helly as the actual inheritor of the mantle of this philosophy, cult, whatever this is. So if he wants Helly, then does Helly want Innie Mark? So now is there really going to be a battle between Innie Mark and Audi Mark where Innie Mark has an opportunity to become the dominant only personality? And by the way, Dylan might want to do that. Innie Dylan might want to do that also to have a reunion. So is that what happens in the next season where rather than we are being oppressed by the Lumen company, do the innies say, we will comply with Lumen. We want to be the only versions of ourselves. Which, by the way, goes back to that. I always had the theory that Milchick is an innie. That is.
I know.
Yeah. So.
Well, you're reminding me too of in the marching band scene.
Yes.
Helly gets up on the table, the desk, I don't know, right? And she's saying like they give us half a life and think that we won't fight for it. Like
right.
They're very much telegraphing some sort of uprising,
right?
In my mind, of all of those severed people saying, you know, to go back to what we were talking about earlier, you can't just treat us like we're dolls to be manipulated. You've created a whole other version of yourself, and now you have to deal with the consequences of that.
Exactly. And that I think that's probably what's going to be explored in the next season because yeah. And and then of course going back to your idea of like the broader culture, could you imagine that this becomes something that people are aware of? Like we are going to free the innies. Right. And then all these Audis are going to be like, what do you mean you're going to free the innies? Yeah, what about me?
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, it's going to be very interesting. You know, all this like talk about the civil rights of the innie is potentially going to destroy the lives of these people on the outside. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of directions that can go with in season 3. My criticism, I'd say, of the season in general, especially towards the end, it's the Milchick thing got sidelined. Obviously, that character got sidelined for sure. I think they could have done more with that. But I also feel that after, like you said, after those earlier episodes, the show kind of lost the simplicity of you know, we could have explored all these ideas with less of the plot machinations, some of the showier things, which of course is what makes the show go viral. So I understand they need some of them. But this is a weird thing to say. I think most people are not going to agree with this. I think the show could have been slower this season. You could imagine the stakes are high enough where, for example, they had this really great cast of these other innies that were there just as a decoy pretty much because they didn't actually come back to the show at all, even though they're like on the cast list for the entire season. And all those actors never came back again after those earlier appearances. But could you imagine you had two teams of MDR and just think about the stakes of that. Like we're only going to keep one team of MDR. So just having them, compete with each other like you do inside of a team, but the stakes could not be higher because if you don't succeed at your job, you're going to get fired, which means that you no longer exist anymore. So even that would have been fun to do, and they could have continued to explore more of the elements of the Lumen mythology. I feel like they gave us a lot of answers, which is good, but maybe they went a little too fast.
Yeah, we commented several times on how fast the episodes were moving and how much plot there was, which at the time, I have to be honest, I did enjoy that.
Me too.
There's a lot happening all the time.
Yeah.
I think I agree with you, but in a different, as I think I'm looking everywhere. I don't know if that's going to be distracting on video, but
no.
I agree with you. I think we're saying the same thing in different words. So much of what is fascinating here is philosophical.
Yeah.
Of this world that is being created with a whole other set of people that are technically the same people that have their own emotions and needs and rights, possibly, right? Which
Right.
is something that was touched on in the first season. I think that's really fascinating. And I think they gave that, I'm kind of repeating myself here, short shrift throughout this season, and then went into it 1,000%
Right.
in this
They
episode.
dove into
And
it.
I love that because I'm fascinated by it. But I was kind of like, where was all this when I was looking at goats, right? Like
Right.
maybe a little less goat time, a little more on the philosophical conflict of this. And yeah, I think there was a lot done as fan service that they could have found a better balance, I think, and had both.
Yeah, I think that there was a way where you could have the same revelations, like you could imagine, where there is a lot of comedy, could have been much more in line with the first season, where you have these two teams comparing notes, talking about, well, this is where I'm from, this was my experience, and but then competing with each other. You can imagine like Dylan being very angrily competing with this other MDR team, but then they start to investigate this mystery by comparing notes. They're making new discoveries. They could have all this angst about losing their personhood. The romance could continue to develop, and we could still see this Drummond character, the Cobell character, all these conspiracy elements on the outside. We could meet these people on the outside world. We should actually, but a lot of what we saw this season could have been spread out over the course of the season, and we could have ended up nearly the same place. With less of the fireworks, which, of course, like you said, I enjoyed them in the moment, but I do feel like maybe they rushed a little bit. And I don't even know how long they want the show to go on for. I mean, this might not be a 5-year show. So maybe they want to get all of the mythology out of the way because maybe they only want to do one more season. These people are all busy. So it's possible that they do one more season to wrap up. So this season had to just cover a lot of ground. So that is a possibility as well. But to your point of how they went headfirst into the philosophy of these characters in this situation, maybe that is all set up. These are the things that are on their minds for season 3. So maybe we will have that in the next season wrapped up. Oh, and of course, another thing we got to see more of is Irv has got to come back for season 3, right?
I mean, does he?
He doesn't actually, but I mean,
Right?
I hope he does for sure.
I hope he does too. And I will say the stuff with Dylan did touch on that.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
think, as I mentioned, I think they could have moved that plot earlier in the season, or
Yeah.
at least started it earlier in the season to make this flow a little bit more smoothly, at least. Or again, just like show us some protests, show us some headlines, something.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of developing this so much that I was happy to have it anyway.
Yeah. And these are all nitpicks. Like I said, I am
Absolutely.
constantly amazed at the level of detail in the world building of this show. Everything
Absolutely.
is not accidental. And there's so many, especially sci-fi shows I watch where, you're trying to get to the end and they just yada yada stuff away. And I loved, like, one of the biggest surprises of this specific episode. I love the fact that they're like, and now any Mark, you're going to do exactly what I say, right? And he's like, why would I do it? And yet, like, what a surprise, because it's not the expectation at all that, of course, that's where the plot is headed. And he's going to be like, no, like, I'm a person now. I'm not a plot device. I'm a
What
person.
makes you think I have to do that?
Right. And it's it's such a great surprise there. And the show doesn't just pay lip service to it. They spent like 10 minutes on it. I thought it was fantastic. I love the fact that the show has that level of patience.
Totally agree.
So all of that was terrific. My nitpick that I do think is a little oversight here is how is Lumen's security this lax? This is preposterous. They have 200 people in the marching band, and yet they have, one security guard.
How do they not have somebody following Mark every minute of the day
Exactly.
when what he's doing is apparently so critically important to their whole mission?
Yeah, exactly. It's like they literally just short staffed. I mean, maybe this will be explored. I think that one possible generous explanation of this is that this is, maybe we think Lumen is so powerful or whatever else. Maybe they are on their last legs, this old company that's disappearing. they do have this technology that they've doubled down on. But who knows that this could just be like now a mainstream Fortune 500 company that has this procedure that people sell to different governments or whatever else. And most of the people have no idea this is going on. And there's this, this old corporate headquarters where this cult that actually still truly believes in this family mythology is running these crazy experiments, and this is all not legit, right? I mean, that's the generous way to read it. If this is like how the company actually runs, and we're supposed to believe that this is, I mean, you go to any corporate headquarters, like literally the building I visited, and there's security guards walking around all over the place. Like just those people would show up. Just those people would show up, much less anything else, right? So, So that all seems preposterous, but maybe explained at some later point. All right. So, anything else you wanted to touch on?
No, I think we discussed everything. I think overall it was a great season after a long wait. It was worth the wait. I'm excited to see what's going to come next. I think they've set up a lot of different plots that they could explore. I need to get they need to give me a better grasp on where the status of this reintegration thing is.
Yes. Yes, for sure.
Because that, if anything, is like the biggest question mark for me, haha, about what's happening with that. Like, is it going to continue? Is it frozen in time as where we've left it? I don't quite get it, but I'm sure it will be explored further.
I think very importantly here that, and this is where it feels like plots, and that's why I mentioned this for sure, where a lot of things on the show don't feel like plots. Seems like it's very, I mean, it's plot obviously, but it feels natural. The one thing that feels a very plot-y in this show, and it's part of the reason I bumped up against that Cobell specific episode, is making Cobell the originator of this technology, because I think that allows her to experiment with the chip. There's some other aspects to the chip. There's some flaw in the chip that only she knows about. It allows you to do that. And I think that's why you've introduced that so late in the game. It gives you that ability of her to be working on the outside and maybe working on the inside too, but she can tune or tweak this reintegration process. I assume that's the case because otherwise you really don't need, like Cobell, even as it is now, you don't need Cobell to be the originator of the technology to get to this point in the story at all, right?
That's a good point.
I think that is why they've introduced that as well. So that could, but I think, so all that is to say that I think that they will explain that or pursue that more. But yeah, I feel the same way. I feel that I was so thrilled in the show, that moment that, oh my God, he's reintegrated, and thinking of the opportunity of like what we saw on the video call where they're talking to each other in his own head, or when he goes into like almost lying to himself, going like, oh, I just need to go into work. And then when he goes into work, he's actually plotting against the other one. And this back and forth between the two of them. I'd love that, like a double agent in one person, talking about the spy metaphor here. That would be fantastic. And they just kind of say like, we'll get around to that maybe next season. Just like we just paused for 6 episodes of the show, maybe more. So it seemed like it was, but yeah, I think that all that is set up for next season. So I did feel like that. I felt like now only in retrospect, by the way, because it was so eventful, I never complained about it. But in retrospect, they put a lot of those things on pause. And, but I do think that season 3 will definitely explore it. And I really hope that we don't have to wait 3 years for another season of the show.
Cross your fingers.
I know. They better start shooting it like right now if it's going to come out within the next year and a half. So, and maybe that is what's happening. So they haven't announced a renewal for season 3, but there is absolutely no way this show's not being renewed. It is literally the most popular show on ever. So it is now more popular than Ted Lasso, which was their most popular show. So there's no way they're not bringing this back. Yeah, all to be seen, but I very much enjoyed it. I bumped up against some things here in the finale, but in general, I really thought that this is a very high bar to try to follow up on season 1 and the buzz that created. And I don't know if this is going to be as buzzy as season 1, but I think if you're in on this show, this was a very satisfying way to end the season and set up so many things for the future and still keep all these interesting themes going.
I agree.
Here on the podcast, we will continue to talk about the White Lotus. 3 more episodes there, and in the near future, check out. We'll be discussing after that when that wraps up. We will be talking about Your Friends and Neighbors. I cannot wait for this show. By the way, the preview got me so worked up. I thought it was so fantastic.
I'm going to go back and watch it again.
Yeah, check it out. And yeah, so I can't wait to see that as well. And the usual calls to action. If you'd like to get more of this content, subscribe to us on YouTube, subscribe to us on your podcatcher of choice. Email us, needssomeintroduction@gmail.com. Write us a nice review. Avoid the not so nice reviews, although those come too as well. We'll take anything we can get.
We'll take
And
what we can get. Maybe consider putting it in an email.
yes, definitely. Email us if you have any criticism. I'd love to hear those as well. And yeah, and we are continuing. I've been watching Dope Thief. Did you watch any of this, Sona? Dope Thief.
I haven't had a chance yet. I still need to finish Jelly Boys. So
Oh, you haven't finished that? Wow. Okay, I finished
haven't
Deli
finished
Boys.
it yet. This
Finished
weekend.
Deli Boys.
Big plans.
That's another show, very funny, and set up season 2 as well. Terrific, very funny. Oh, speaking of funny, I've only seen 1 episode of this, but Shonda Rhimes has a new comedy murder mystery called The Residents. Have you heard of this?
I haven't.
It's on Netflix. It is very much like the Knives Out tone,
Okay.
and but it takes place. Someone has been murdered in the White House, and they're having a party the day of. So there's like foreign dignitaries, and there's the people who work in there, and everybody's a suspect basically.
Love it.
And you have this mastermind investigator in the midst of it. I forget her name. She was from Orange is the New Black. Anyway, she's this savant investigator. She's very funny. The tone is not as zany as like Clue, for example. It very much is very straight-faced comedy like the Knives Out films. But I've only seen 1 episode so far. But the comedy in this is so funny. This kind of dry way that everybody makes fun of each other. And these characters are such specific types. I laughed out loud multiple times watching that first episode. So
That sounds great.
we'll continue to watch it. I'll continue to watch it. One more thing I'm watching this week, along with Dope Thief and whatever else is coming in the future. There's so many things coming out. It can't even keep track of them. That Happy Face Killer show came out. I recommend. I mentioned it to you. I haven't watched any of it. There's just way too much other things to watch right now.
It's a good problem.
It is a good problem. There's a lot of good content coming up. All right, Sona, as usual, thank you again.
Thank you.
Great to see your lovely face on camera.
Same.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye.